Okay. Hello, hello, Rick. Welcome to For the Love of Literacy. So glad you're here today. How are
Thank you.
you?
I'm good, Katie. Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. So let's go.
Let's go. That's right. I know. We're good. We're getting this set up and we're going with it. That's right. I'm so glad that is it your agent who reached out to me
Uh,
originally,
I,
Liz?
I believe she's my
Your
publicist.
publicist. I'm
Yes.
so glad that she reached out to me, that she found me. Seriously, so glad because I'm intrigued by your work. And we'll talk about what's going on behind you. You've got a lot of very interesting things going on. You've had a very successful life. So if you want to do I introduced you before I came on, but if you want to do a quick intro of yourself and then we'll jump into writing, when you started writing, what you're writing, all those fun things.
Okay. Well, since we're going to jump into that, my intro to me would be that I my parents really kicked off who I am, as most parents do, but in a very, very concrete way, because my dad was a scientist. He worked with Einstein. He was a painter. He was a corporate executive, total right brain, left brain, both.
Yeah.
My mother was a university educator and sang on the radio. Again, left brain, right brain. I inherited that. So my entire life, I've been able to work in both creative fields and in corporate America. And I just found them equally satisfying. And I enjoy working for someone, and I enjoy doing my own thing. That's me.
That's a really good way to be, I think. I mean, I don't have the full left and right brain like you're saying. I definitely have more of the creative and writing side, but I can appreciate and love all the arts, all the art forms. So we'll get into all of that, of course. But
Sure.
hey, so tell us a little bit about how you started writing, and how did working with a writing group help you as an author?
Okay, well, I'm going to go back a little because I started writing actually when I was about 12 years old. When I was 12, I wrote a sports newspaper and I made 4 carbon copies and sold them to my 4 closest neighbors. I also started writing songs then. When I was 15, I wrote a play. When I was in college, I studied filmmaking. And so I was writing scripts for student films in college, also writing songs, writing music. I wrote a rock opera. Um,
Oh, wow.
and then during my career in the music industry, which was the industry I was in until the early 2000s, um, I, I played music, but I also became a senior executive. And while I was doing all that, I was also writing newspaper and magazine columns and articles and some nonfiction book chapters and anthologies. But it wasn't until I retired and moved from New York City to Ashland, Oregon, where I currently live. Um, and I joined a writing group. My next door neighbor was a poet, and
Oh, cool.
yeah, it was very cool. And she and I became friends, and she learned about my prior writing. And she said, "Why don't you join the group? I think the people would like you. I think you'd like them, and maybe it'll just stir your juices to maybe write some fiction or some other nonfiction." So I joined the group. I really did like the people a lot. And I started writing my first fiction, and it was short stories. And then I wrote 2 books, and neither of them went anywhere and probably will never, ever go anywhere. In reading back on them, they were okay, but they weren't great. And then I wrote this short story that was the precursor to the Pignon Scorpion book that I have out now. And the writing group just glommed onto it. I mean, they said, "This is special. You've got to expand this short story and make it into a book." And that's what I did. And that's kind of how my writing career was kind of my whole life, but not in fiction. So I got a whole new life in my
Yeah,
60s and 70s, you know?
I know that's amazing. So, and tell our listeners, you're in your 70s now?
I will be 78 the month after next.
Wow.
Yeah,
See, I just love that. I think it is so neat. I love having people on the show of all different backgrounds and ages, but I mean all different ages. And I feel like for sure I can say you are the oldest I've had on my show, but that is so cool. I've had an 8-year-old on my show too. And so it's just like,
that's great.
it's neat to see this spectrum. Yeah, her mom helped her write a chapter book. Like her mom, she dictated, and her mom wrote the chapter book. But I just, pardon me, but I just really love seeing all the backgrounds. Yeah, hearing, and a lot of people, I love it. A lot of authors I brought on the show uh, were didn't set out to be writers or wrote informally through their lives, or I mean, like me, I was an education major in college, and I meant to be a print journalist, but then I switched. And here I am back to, I love teaching school, and but here I am back to my writing roots, you know. And so it's just
Yeah.
interesting to see how we all process things and what we decide to go with. And I'm really excited too to talk about your new book. It's Pinion, right?
Pignon Scorpion.
Pinion, Scorpion. How would you say it's different from like a Sherlock Holmes? That's something I kind of grew up with and was really into. How would you say that, or like a Nancy Drew, like any of those mystery books?
Well, I would say that in a way, it's a reimagining of Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot's worlds, but with different elements. It takes place mostly in a barber shop where Scorpion, solves the cases with the assistance of the barbers and the
Uh,
shoeshine man and a young reporter and a brilliant female bookstore owner. Um, Unlike both Holmes and Poirot, um, Scorpion is very collegial because the others solve their cases alone, basically. He
uh,
likes working with the team. He also has a love interest. I mean, I've read every Holmes book. I've read it, and story, and same with Poirot and Miss Marple and whatever. And one of the things I could tell you about Holmes and Poirot is they had virtually no romantic liaisons, nothing. They were
yeah.
very much not. One of them had one little liaison, maybe, the other nothing. Whereas, and neither of them were portrayed in the books as particularly attractive men. Um, Scorpion is a very athletically built, attractive man who was married, now has a love interest in the book. And so he's a very different type of character. Um, He's also, you like Poirot, he's a clothes horse, but a different type of a clothes horse, one that was more ahead of his time than at the top of the time's game, if you will. But other than that, they're very similar because what I really tried to do was recreate the feeling, the language, the pacing, the tone, the words of those kinds of stories and that what I'm going to call the Downton Abbey era,
Mm-hmm.
and transport people back to then. It's one of the things. I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, you'll stop me. But one of the things that I find very good that I like is a number of people have said after reading the book, what I really liked about it was it entertained me and it made me forget my stresses. And we live in a very stressful world. And this is a book written about a much calmer, peaceful, kinder, gentler time and
Mm-hmm.
place. And so it transports people. And that's part of what I want to do. I want to entertain people. I'm not the kind of writer that thinks I'm necessarily going to write the book that's going to win the prize for the best written book of the year.
Yeah.
My goal is to entertain people and have them forget their cares. And at the end of the book, go, I laughed. I tried to figure out mysteries. I enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. And I think, like I said, having read Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot, how do I say his last name?
Poirot.
Poirot. I think that for sure there's just there's so many fun aspects there, but neither one of them, yeah, has a love interest or like does it delve into that at all. And so I also didn't know that May was designated as Mystery Month, which is
Yes,
awesome.
it is.
And that's so cool. I'm glad that it worked out for us to chat this month about mysteries. And how did you come up with your new mystery novel and whodunit series? Like, what really sparked your desire to write? Like you said, you wanted to entertain. You wrote to entertain, but what like really kicked it off?
Okay, well, the background really is that like I said, just read every mystery my whole life. I mean, I started with the Hardy Boys, and I don't know if you even remember them or not,
I
but
do. My dad
okay,
had a set of them growing up,
ah,
but like, yes, he loved
there
the
you
Hardy
go.
Boys.
Yeah, so I started with the Hardy Boys, and then I read Christie and Doyle, and I read Raymond Chandler and Chester Himes and Earl Stanley. I just consumed. So I had, as part of the fabric of my being, my entire life, mysteries as my favorite genre. Okay, so that's the underpinnings. But really, what happened is I write as a pantser. I do not plot anything else in front. I don't outline, I don't bullet point. I literally sit down at a computer keyboard and I see a story play out in my mind like a movie. And my job is to sit there and type out what I'm seeing in my mind so that a reader potentially see in their mind what I'm seeing in my mind. I go back later and maybe add red herrings and clean it up and add a character here or there. But the genesis of the story was just, it popped into my head one day and I went, that's cool. And so I started writing it.
I love that. So do you, when you get like a vision or like your creative vision in your head, do you have to sit down and do it all in one sitting? Just get it all out?
Well, that is a problem that my wife has, yes. And it's not that I'm going to get it out in one sitting. I mean, it's pretty hard to write, a
Right.
300-page novel in one sitting.
You'd be
But
pulling some all-nighters, yeah.
yes, quite a few. But I don't have a set writing schedule. There are some authors who say, well, I write 5,000 words a day, or I write this or that. I don't. I kind of set monthly goals for myself.
Mhm.
And when I feel like writing, I write, which is a lot of the time. But I just find, since these are playing out in my head and I don't want to miss any of it, I do tend to write for long stretches, but then I might not write for a couple of days and then go back and write an 8 or 10 hour stretch.
Oh yeah. Wow. That's so cool. It's just neat to hear. And like for me, my biggest thing that determines it is I'm in the mood to write, but I'm a mom and I have littles. And so right now, generally the writing, I wouldn't even say I have a routine. It's just when the house is quiet, whether it's
Yeah.
first thing in the morning or last thing at night. And it's just kind of for me, just the consistency. And I do a lot of journal writing. And I've so far just written for kids, but I'm working on a self-help for adults. That's probably going
Oh,
to just like go through so many edits. But
cool.
yeah, finding the time for me is
Yeah.
the biggest issue right now.
Well,
It's
I have a little bit of that issue too, because I have a full-time job as head of business development for Blackstone Publishing. So I'm
yeah,
fitting writing in between a job and taking care of the dog and everything else that one does in life.
right. So that brings up another point. Tell me a little bit more about being a publishing executive because I'm sure it is quite a lot of work, and especially at your age too. So when did you start doing that, and what works have you acquired for publishing? If you want to name a few, any favorites?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can get in trouble doing that because it's sort of like, which of your children is your favorite? I
That's
mean, like,
true.
which of my author? But
Yeah.
I'll name a few. I um I think it's worth a little bit of a short story as to how I got into publishing, because I was in the music industry, and in 2003, my wife and I moved from New York City to Ashland, Oregon, in the middle of nowhere, and I retired. We both retired. She was in the music industry as well. And I joined boards of directors, the Shakespeare Festival, the Film Festival, the Food Bank, the university, because I didn't really want my brain to atrophy and I didn't want all the knowledge I had built up over my lifetime to go to waste. But it still wasn't fulfilling enough, and I was starting to get bored. And a very close friend of mine and my wife's, his name's Christopher, came here to Ashland, and he came here to license Winnie the Pooh to Blackstone because he owned the
Okay.
rights to Winnie the Pooh for audio. And he
Yeah.
did. And he stayed with us, with Deborah and me, while he was down here doing the deal. And he mentioned to Craig Black, who was the owner of, still is the owner of Blackstone, about Deborah and me, and said, you know, you should meet them. They probably know something, you know, they have New York City corporate experience that nobody in your company has. Maybe without changing your culture, they can add something to your company. So Craig called us up. We had lunch the following week. And at the end of lunch, Craig said, Christopher's right. I really don't know what I'm going to do with you two, but what I do know is you've got knowledge other people in my company don't have. So would you be willing to consult to us? I said, so we said, sure. And so we joined their first board of directors and we started consulting. My wife then decided to fully retire. And at that point, I went on staff at Blackstone. Nice for me. I work out of my house, even though it's a mile and a half from the office. But even pre-COVID, I was working out of the house. And I've just really enjoyed it. I've been able to mentor people. I've been able to do a lot of things. And one of the things I've been able to do is acquire top quality catalogs, authors, and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just going to name some that come to the top of my mind. I'm
Okay.
sure I'm going to forget some. And if any of my authors are listening and I forget you, please don't take it personally. Okay.
Right, exactly.
But
Yeah.
I'll name some of the bigger ones. I've been able to bring to the company Gabriel Garcia Marquez, James Clavell and his entire Asian series, including Shogun. I've been able to bring Leon Uris, Catherine Coulter. I just did a deal with Al Roker for his mystery series. I just did a deal with Robert Downey Jr. for a book called Cool Food, which is about how to reduce the carbon imprint in food consumption and growing.
Oh, wow.
You're familiar with the book Tuesdays with Morrie?
Yes.
Yes, well, Morrie Schwartz was the Morrie of Tuesdays with Morrie. And before he died, Morrie wrote a book that his son found and edited, and we're putting it out. I signed it. It's called Morrie on Aging. That'll be coming out next year.
Cool.
Yeah. I signed Natasha Boyd, who did one of our biggest selling books, The Indigo Girl. I signed Pamela Ewing, who did Queen of Paris. I signed Nicholas Sansbury Smith, who has Helldivers, Andrews and Wilson, who are among the most popular military writers. I just signed Patrick Larkin and Dale Brown. I've signed a lot of authors and catalogs. I did a deal with Weird Tales magazine and with Valiant Comics, and we're going to be doing imprints with both of those publications. So it's been quite varied, and I'm leaving out a ton of very deserving authors, but I just don't have, it would take the entire podcast to name them all.
Yeah. That's fascinating. So that's really neat. I'll have to add all of that into my show notes so that everybody, learns all these cool people. Because I mean, it's not like I'm planning to do this anytime soon, but my husband and I have talked about pros and cons of starting a publishing company after my first book got published this last year, and what the risks are and what the benefits are, and oh my goodness, there's just so much to go into. But I love that you've done this and to learn all the people that you've worked with. And give me just a second, my Zoom is being funny.